Alright, let's get into some class comparisons between 1D&D and Tales of the Valiant. Well, technically I'm going to hold off on 1D&D because we don't have the specifics of every class, we just have previews. But since they didn't take the time to add the Artificer to 1D&D, that class is not going to see an update anytime soon. But we do have the Mechanist from Kobold Press's Tales of the Valiant. And what I'd like to do today is sit down with the two classes and compare them level by level to give you an idea of how these classes will feel if you choose to play one or the other in your upcoming 5e games. At the end of the video, I'll share my opinion on which of these I would choose as a player, and share which one I would prefer to see in my own tables as a GM moving forward with 5e. And if you pay close attention to the end of the video, you may see me get attacked by a dragon. First, let's look at a basic overview of both of these classes. This is what you'll find very early on in the description of each class, and you can see right off the bat that there are very few differences. The Mechanist has a slightly higher hit die with a d10 instead of a d8. Both have the exact same armor proficiencies. The Mechanist does gain martial weapon proficiency, which is nice, and they have a little bit more flexibility in what tools they choose, where the Mechanist gets Tinker's Tools plus 2 of your choice. The Artificer gets Tinker's Tools and Thieves' Tools and 1 more of choice. The Mechanist could technically choose Thieves' Tools anyway, but there is something to be said for having the ability to take something else if that's what your character is more likely to have interest in. Their saves are exactly the same, and they also have the same number of skills. The Artificer does have a slightly longer set of skills to choose from, but if you don't care about medicine or nature, that's not going to matter at all, and skills tend to be very easy to pick up from other places in the character building process anyway, like backgrounds. At first level, the Mechanist gets the Eyes of the Maker ability, which is a convenience thing, but not really something that any other character can't do with enough time. They get the ability to identify a magic item just by touching it, rather than having to wait for an entire short rest to figure out the abilities of said item. Again, not something that other players can't do, but definitely a convenience thing. Time can be a very valuable resource, and I can certainly think of some circumstances in which being able to identify a magic item very quickly could be a big advantage. The Mechanist also gets the Shard of Creation, which is kind of like a little tiny magic plasma ball that you can change into a medium or smaller object. There is a gold level limit per level. I think it's 20 gold per Mechanist level. That's the maximum value of the item that you create. But even very early on, that's going to open up a lot of different options from the item lists in the player's guide. As long as you're touching an item that's made with this shard, you get to add a d6 to an ability check, and you can use that a number of times equal to your intelligence bonus per long rest. So a little bit of a minor inspiration piece, similar in some ways to the Bard, but you can only apply it to yourself, and you have to be touching the item that you made with your little plasma ball. Artificers get magical tinkering instead, giving a prestidigitation-like effect to some item indefinitely, which in a similar vein to Eyes of the Maker is not really a power thing, but it is kind of a convenience thing. If there's a prestidigitation-like effect that you want active all the time, you don't want to have to cast that cantrip over and over and over and over for it to be relevant every time you need it. Artificers also get first level Artificer spells, which is pretty cool, and something that the Mechanist doesn't have access to directly except through subclass features. Once we get to level 2, both of these classes start to get abilities that let them create magical items. They're called different things, but they function mostly the same. The biggest difference between the classes is the types of effects you get to choose and how many active items you can have at any given time. When you first get the ability, the Mechanist only has 2 choices from their list, but they can have 3 active items at any given time. The Artificer, on the other hand, gets 4 different choices from their list of infused items, but they can only have 2 active at any given time. Now, going through the different options is beyond the scope of this video. That would make this video far too long. But if you're interested in a breakdown of all those and a comparison, let me know in the comments and I'll put that on the list for a future video. I will say as a general note though that the augments for the Mechanist tend to be a little better for the combat-oriented character, and the infusions for the Artificer tend to have a lot more utility ability. Ooh, that rhymed. Utility ability. What the Mechanist gets at this level that the Artificer doesn't is the efficient action, which is a way to use your bonus action for the use an object action or a weapon option. This gives the Mechanist a little bit of an edge in combat over the Artificer, whereas the Artificer gets spells and such. The Mechanist is already starting to see some weapon options and the ability to put their weapons to better use. And that's in addition to the different types of augments that you can add to the same weapons that you're also using the weapon option for. I'm eager to see what my players come up with as cool combinations of augments and weapon options in the future. At 3rd level, both the Mechanist and the Artificer get to choose their subclass. And I won't get into all the options of both, but I will say that the Mechanist has a subclass available to it that lets it add spells to its repertoire of tricks. And on the other end of the spectrum, the Artificer has a subclass that gets to add a lot of combat-related abilities to its repertoire of tricks. So we really get a lot of both classes trying to meet the same need as far as what players are trying to go for with their characters. Now in Tales of the Valiant, we get a new augment at this point, which brings them up to 3 and gets them closer to having the same number of abilities to choose as far as how they can manipulate their items. And the Artificer gets the right tool for the job, which lets you magically create a set of artisan's tools. At 4th level, we get an ability score improvement, which is very similar between the two games, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but I will just say I really like the talent version of this, specifically because no matter what talent you choose, you get to increase one ability score by 1 point, and it's not limited by what type of talent you choose. In most other ways, the talents are very similar, if not functionally equivalent, to a half feat, in which you get a slightly smaller ability, but you get to add a point to an ability score. And in this case, it's your choice, rather than in traditional D&D, you taking a feat that has an ability score attached to it. You typically don't get a lot of choice with that ability score. If you take Keen Mind, for example, you're going to be increasing your intelligence. But with the Tales of the Valiant version, it doesn't matter what talent you take, you can increase any ability score you'd like. At level 5, we get multi-attack for the Mechanist, again bringing us more in line with that combat-centric version of the magical item crafter. They get an additional augment, which increases the range of abilities that they can give to the items that they're influencing. And they gain an additional item that they can have augmented at any given time, bringing them up to a total of 4. Meanwhile, the Artificer, while they still have a lot of flexibility and even more flexibility through their spellcasting, can only have 2 infused items active at any given time. The other big difference here is that the Artificer gains a subclass feature at level 5. I wonder if and when they update this class for 1D&D, if they will adjust the feature level for this class. They didn't adjust anything above level 3 for the other classes, which was a big disappointment for me. But I just wonder, if they're going to switch this one around and break the mold when they release this in the future. At level 6, our Mechanist gets Rapid Augment, which lets you change or add an augmentation to a weapon as a bonus action. It doesn't have to be a weapon. But the Mechanist is so combat focused, then I can imagine a lot of times if I was playing the class, I would be augmenting my weapons. The Artificer at level 6 gets Tool Expertise, which is pretty cool, getting to double your proficiency bonus when you're using a given tool. They also get 2 new infusions and an additional infused item, bringing them up to 3, which is closer to the Mechanist's 4, but still lagging slightly behind. At level 7, the Mechanist gets a subclass feature and an additional choice of an augment, while the Artificer gets the Flash of Genius, which lets them use a reaction to add their intelligence modifier to an ability check or a saving throw. At level 8, we get another improvement for both classes. And level 9, we start getting into some really juicy stuff. For the Mechanist, we get to increase the Shard of Creation's ability check bonus to a D8, and you get to create objects up to a large size, which really opens up a lot of creative things that a player can come up with. They also get to add a new augment, their list of options as far as how they can modify items, and they get to augment yet another item, bringing them up to having 5 augmented items active at any given time. On the Artificer side, we get their subclass feature, which, again, we won't go into detail, but they do get access to 3rd level spells, which is pretty cool. At level 10, the Mechanist gets a heroic boon, and this is a choice of abilities that every class in Tales of the Valiant gets at level 10. Of course, they're specific to the individual classes, but for the Mechanist, they get to choose between the Curse of Unmaking, which lets you hit something and make it vulnerable to all damage until it makes a saving throw later on. That is an incredibly powerful ability that, under the right circumstances, can really increase your damage output. If they're less focused on destruction, they can also choose Mend the Broken, which lets them heal a creature or item up to 5 times their Mechanist level in hit points. Each of these is limited to just once per long rest, but they do have a big impact when they do come online. Personally, I think I'm a bigger fan of the Curse of Unmaking and getting to hit something on your next turn, or letting an ally hit something on their next turn for an incredibly large number of hit points damage. On the Artificer side, we get the Magic Item Adept. This ability lets you attune up to 4 items, which is a big deal in 5th edition. This ability also gives Artificers the option to craft common and uncommon magic items at a reduced rate, taking a fourth of the time and spending only half of the gold to craft those items. As a side note, I'm just going to point out that I don't plan to cover 11 through 20 in these reviews, just because the lower half of gameplay here tends to be the sweet spot in as far as how long campaigns last, and the upper levels, while interesting, are just far less important in the grand scheme of things because so few campaigns take the time and last long enough for those levels to matter. And then for me personally, I can't remember the last time I didn't multi-class a character, so those upper levels, for me as a player, they're just not happening typically anyway. But all that said, these two classes are very similar in a lot of ways. If you kind of want to compare them, I like to think in terms of the Mechanist being more of a Percy character, very much a warrior first, but being an inventor and having that be a big part of the character's thing. On the other hand, the Artificer is a lot more like Pumat, still very much an inventor of magic creations, but a caster first and foremost. And that plays out in most of the character abilities as well, with the Mechanist more focused on combat abilities and the Artificer more focused on versatility. As a player, I think my choice would come down to which subclasses I was choosing. As long as I was focused on the subclass that made each of these more like the other, for example, the Mechanist subclass that adds more spellcasting, or the Artificer class that adds more combat-related melee abilities, as long as one or the other of those is the subclass I choose, I could go either way. I like both of these. As a GM, I actually don't mind either of these in my campaign. I don't think I would want more than one in a party for a very selfish reason. I enjoy giving magic items to the players, to the characters, and I think the more players have access to easily created magic items within their own class features, the more trivial those magic items rewards that I'm giving out seem. And while that doesn't take away all my fun by any stretch of the imagination, it does minimize one aspect of the game that I really enjoy, making even low-level magic items special when they're awarded to the players. So what do you think of these two classes? Which one is the better of the...